Hello, my name is Jorg Mertin and I'm going to show you today how to implant a PHP remote agent probe in a Docker PHP application for monitoring with DX APM SaaS. The idea is to monitor a PHP application in a Docker environment using the DX APM infrastructure agent with enabled PHP extension. This without modifying the PHP application base image, and the probe will be implanted at container start only. A typical PHP application environment would look like in this drawing. We have the PHP application containers. These have each an installed web server. The PHP engine will be running inside the web server or linked to the web server depending on the used technology, PHP or PHP FPM. The PHP remote probe will be hooked into that existing PHP installation and collect the monitoring data to be sent to the PHP extension residing on the APM IA, which in turn will send it to the DX APM SaaS backend. A typical approach to monitor a PHP application would be to first deploy the infrastructure agent, then add the PHP extension and enable it and make sure both are working correctly. And last, to implant the PHP remote agent probe into the actual PHP application to be monitored. Please confirm the PHP application is running correctly before the probe implant process, so in case it won't run afterwards, we know who the culprit is. For the following live example, the process has been automated by using the APM IA PHP extension volume code found on GitHub. In short, what we will do is to build the image and use that image in our YAML control files of the PHP application to be monitored. For the following demo, we're going to use a very simple WordPress installation. It really is a most basic installation as can be seen in the Docker Compose file. The application itself is defined in here in the service entry. The database used with this application is defined here. And last, the proxy which will give us the possibility to use HTTPS termination is defined below. The three containers are already running for our demo. And the WordPress website is live and can be manipulated at will, what we do require for our demo. To be able to implant a PHP remote probe, we need to build the image which will hold all the required code to run the APM IA agent with the PHP extension and the PHP remote probe. Under GitHub, we can download the build kit which will do most of the work for us. The documentation on how to set it all up, build the image and use it is provided in the usual readme.md file and displayed on GitHub. So let's copy the git clone link to clone the repository. After the cloning process, we will have a new APM IA directory. Let's change into that directory and have a look at its content, where we will need to execute the build image script. The first run will cause an error message due to the missing configuration file that provides the APM IA PHP and MySQL download links to the build script. We will have to provide these locations, and for that, let's go to the DX APM SaaS environment, APM agent links, and select download agent. Select the PHP agent first, open the command line, copy the link and add the link to the appropriate section in the just created configuration file. Next, we need to provide the MySQL agent download link. In our specific demo case, this is just considered as a goodie. Note, however, that usually every PHP application comes with a database. Get the download link and save it to the configuration file into the appropriate section. And launch the script. It will ask to download the PHP and MySQL archives. Let's say yes. The reason we use this approach is that whenever we download an agent from the download section, the connection details are already implanted into the archive. The internet connection speed will of course determine how long the download is going to take. In this case, the internet's rather fast. Once the download was successful, the build kit will show us which agent, extensions and release have been downloaded and ask for confirmation to build the actual image. The build process will ask if you want to use the cache or not. It has an implication into the security of the OS files inside of the image, which will be deployed into a container. If you want to apply the latest security fixes, select No. If, however, it is a second or later run on the same day, you can choose to use the cache as it will speed up the build process drastically. I'll be using the cache to speed up the build in this demo. Once the build is done, it will show us which image has been created. By default, the image will be tagged with the version number of the implanted PHP extension Remote Agent Probe. We can see here the tagging of the image to be on version 20.6.0.28. So, once we have created the image, check the documentation to see how to use it. As stated previously, we need to make sure we have a running APM agent. It does not really matter where it runs. It can be inside a container, on the host itself, or a remote host. For the best results, however, the APM should run on the actual host. In our example, we will deploy the APM agent image as a Docker container. The marked segment is what we will need to add into our YAML control files. And to speed the process, I have prepared a Docker Compose demo file here. The service to be added is this one. Depending on the APM deploy flag, the APM agent will be started if set to true. If set to false, only a passive volume will be created. This volume is required as it contains all the code to run the APM agent, the PHP MySQL extensions, or to implant the PHP Remote Agent Probe into a PHP environment. The rest is really just configuration tasks. If looking at the APM env variable names, we see that these are very similar to the actual intrascope agent configuration options. So completing the APM env intrascope variable name, we can configure all the existing options for the APM IA as known by the agent. The documentation will provide an official link for the details on how to do it. Once the APM IA agent is configured, we need to configure the actual application. For this, we reroute the entry point. We do so in the services definition of the WordPress application and define the entry point keyword to point to /opt/apmia/run.sh. We need to make the application depend on the volume provided by our APM image, in our case APM-PHP-volume. Next, we send the PHP deploy flag to be true. The app name and displayed host name have to be changed too. This because the Docker container have randomly created host names that change on every run. We can also configure a target for the log files. And very important is to point the PHP underline AI host to point to the actually running APM agent. As we can see, I had the APM agent running on the host, but as on our example we're going to make it run inside a Docker container, we have to change the IA host variable to point to actually the running Docker container hosting the APM agent. The most crucial part here is to identify the actual entry point of the container running the PHP application. This entry point or CMD is what is started as first in the container when this one is deployed. It can be a script or a binary. We will need to identify which script or program is started when the image is deployed as a container, and there are several ways to do that. Docker inspect can help us to look for the actual entry point keyword or command keyword depending on the build of the image. However, you can have 2, 3, 5 entries, so it does not always help us. If all fails, go into the container and check which entry has PID 1, and that will be your entry point command. Eventually, you'll also find a script called entry point in the directory structure inside of the running container. If we applied all required changes, let's activate these. I will just copy my demo file to the real Docker Compose YAML file and start it up. A new APM PHP volume container will be deployed, and the WordPress container will be recreated as we changed its configuration. We can confirm that both containers, the new ones that we just deployed, are up and running. Let's verify if there are any errors in our APM container deployment. The WordPress redeployment log should show us when the PHP Probe Implant is started and will drop a report on what it did, providing details. It will show us also which variables have been used to call the Implant program. It shows an entire report on what has been done, and in the end is going to show us that the entry point, the real one we extracted before, is being executed. The difference being that we have in the meantime implanted the PHP remote agent probe into the underlying PHP infrastructure. So the application is live. Let's generate some traffic. It will take some seconds to see the metrics come into the DX APM SaaS UI. Let's jump into the metrics view and have a look at our system. We'll first look for the host name we are running all these two agents and probe on. Then we see the infrastructure agent with the MySQL extension, which will show us some more details on what the MySQL system actually has seen. The system will also show us details on what the PHP remote agent probe has extracted as information and metrics, including URLs we have been using some seconds ago. This concludes the demo on how to implant a PHP remote agent probe into a Docker application for monitoring with DX APM SaaS. Thank you.